On November 13th, 1999, at around 2:30 in the afternoon, the body of a 32-year-old woman named Namiko Takaba was found inside her home in Nagoya, Japan, by her landlord and his wife. Namiko was lying with her legs in the hallway and her torso inside the living room. Her neck had been severely cut, with some sources reporting it was almost completely severed from her body. Blood had pooled around her, with visible trails running through the hallway, and additional blood drips gathered near the entryway of the home. The landlord and his wife, horrified by what they'd walked into, immediately called 119. Paramedics arrived and pronounced Namiko dead at the scene, then contacted her husband Satoru to let him know that she had passed away. But nothing could have prepared him for the reality of what had happened. Today, we're talking about a case that stumped Japanese investigators for over 2 decades and became one of Japan's most haunting unsolved murders. This is the case of Namiko Takaba. When investigators arrived on the scene, they began going through the apartment and found something that made an already terrible situation even harder to process. Namiko's young son, Kohei, was just sitting in the kitchen. He was untouched and physically unharmed, but he must have heard everything that happened to his mother. Shortly after, Satoru arrived. He had been told that his wife had passed away due to some kind of medical emergency, nothing that clearly communicated what was actually waiting for him at home. He was kept outside while investigators worked the scene. It was only afterward that paramedics pulled Satoru aside and told him the truth, that his wife had likely been murdered. The crime itself made no sense. Nothing about the family really stood out. The family lived in a regular apartment. Satoru Takaba was 43 years old and worked as a real estate agent at a tower condominium. Namiko was 32, and there isn't much known about her activities outside the home. Their son Kohei was just 2 years old at the time of the incident. By all accounts, they were a normal, happy family. And neighbors described them warmly. They greeted people kindly, generally kept to themselves, and weren't shown to have any problems with anyone. So what could have led to something like this? Let's go back to the morning of November 13th. Koi had been sick since the day before, so that morning, Namiko had planned to take him to the hospital. At around 11 a.m., after she dropped Satoru off at work, she took Koi to get checked out, and then they returned home at around 11:50. Neighbors noted that the sound of a television could be heard coming from the apartment at around that time. Then, at around 1 p.m., a resident of the building heard what they described as a fight, or maybe the sound of someone moving furniture, followed by the sound of footsteps running down the stairs. They didn't think much of it at the time. The 2 other people present in the building at the time also reported hearing a loud noise, like a large closet being dragged or moved, again followed by what sounded like someone running downstairs. Between noon and 2 p.m., a friend of Namiko's called the house multiple times and got no answer. At 2:30 p.m., the landlord and his wife came by the Takaba apartment. They brought some produce from their garden to share. The landlord's wife had called ahead, but didn't get an answer, so she figured they should just stop by anyway. They rang the doorbell, they knocked, but nothing. The apartment was completely silent. The wife tried the door and found it unlocked, so she stepped inside and found Namiko lying dead on the floor. When police and paramedics examined the scene, here's what they found. Namiko was lying face down. She had multiple wounds on her neck that appeared to have been made by a sharp blade. There were also wounds on her hands, consistent with defensive injuries. She had tried to stop the attack. The cause of death, according to the paramedics, was excessive blood loss. Based on her movements that day and witness timelines, investigators estimated she had died somewhere between noon and 1 p.m., with a more precise estimate pointing to around 12:30 p.m. and there was no sign of a robbery. Nothing appeared to have been taken. The apartment hadn't been ransacked. The TV was on and tuned to what was apparently Namiko's favorite drama. On the kotatsu in front of the TV, there was a cup of noodles still soaking in hot water, and a bowl of miso soup Koi had left over from breakfast. A vacuum cleaner was sitting in front of the front door, suggesting Namiko had been cleaning when her killer showed up. The blood trail ran from near the front door, through the hallway, toward the bathroom where blood had been found in the sink, leading investigators to believe the perpetrator had washed their hands before leaving. Now here's where the physical evidence starts to build a picture of who the killer might have been. Investigators found blood stains and shoe prints at the scene that didn't belong to Namiko. They were located near the doorstep and close to her body. They tested the blood that was suspected to belong to the perpetrator, likely from a wound Namiko inflicted while fighting back. The blood was identified as type B. Based on the DNA evidence, investigators believe the perpetrator was a woman in her 40s or 50s at the time of the murder. As for the shoe prints, they were identified as coming from a pair of Korean-made women's shoes, size 8 with a heel. But there was more. The blood trail didn't stop at the apartment. Despite the perpetrator washing her hands in the bathroom, drops of blood were found in the hallway, on the stairs, and in the parking lot of the building. The trail continued away from the apartment and extended through the surrounding area, eventually leading investigators toward Inao Park, roughly 500 meters away. 2 witnesses reported seeing a woman in the area. The first said she was wearing a pink top. The second witness described seeing a woman in black, standing on the road in front of Inao Park, clutching her hand as if she was injured. And she was apparently waiting for a car to stop. The 2 witnesses may have given different descriptions of her clothing, but their descriptions of the woman's physical appearance were consistent. At the park itself, investigators found traces of blood, suggesting that someone had tried to wash blood from their hands. From there, it appeared that the suspect had headed north into a residential area in the direction of Kita Ward. Given that she was presumably covered in, or at least marked with blood, and walking through a neighborhood in broad daylight, it was quite unusual that she hadn't attracted more attention. Back inside the apartment, one more piece of evidence turned up that investigators hadn't expected. On the doorknob, there were liquid remnants of a probiotic drink, similar to Yakult. The Takaba family didn't consume that kind of beverage, so it stood out. And on the kitchen table, right where Kohei had been sitting alone, investigators found a half-finished bottle of one of those drinks that appeared to have been brought into the apartment by someone else. When they traced the serial number on the bottle, they found it had been sold in the Nishimikawa area, about 35 kilometers from the crime scene. Investigators later concluded the perpetrator may have used the disguise of being a drink salesperson, someone going door to door, as a way to gain access to the apartment without raising suspicion. It would explain why Namiko may have opened the door, and why she may not have seen the threat coming. So, with blood DNA, shoe prints, witness sightings, a beverage traced to a specific region, and a solid timeline of events, why couldn't police catch the killer? A few things worked against the investigation from the start. The police temporarily suspended their dog tracking operation on the night of the incident. The stated reason was frustration with the media, which had been aggressively pursuing the case and attempting to gain access to the bereaved family, including 2-year-old Kohei. And heavy rain that evening also washed away the blood stains at the park and erased the perpetrator's footprints, eliminating a significant portion of the initial physical trail. The police put 100,000 officers on the case and interviewed 5,000 people, but they found no suspects. With no clear answers, various theories circulated over the years about who did it and why. One of the more widely discussed possibilities was that the killer had come to the wrong apartment, that Namiko had been killed by mistake. At the time of the murder, a resident with a different family name lived next door, but that name was written using the same kanji, or Chinese characters, as Takaba. For someone unfamiliar with Japanese, or even for someone whose kanji reading wasn't solid, the two nameplates could easily have been confused. After robbery was ruled out, investigators considered that it was the result of a grudge or personal motive. They interviewed everyone connected to the Takaba family and went through every relationship and interaction the couple had. Nothing suspicious came up. Everyone who knew them described them positively, to the extent that one investigator remarked that there was no couple less hated than Satoru and Namiko. So, at a certain point, investigators moved away from the grudge theory as well, leaving the motive genuinely unclear. After the murder, Satoru and Koei moved in with Satoru's parents in another part of the city. And it's understandable for someone to move after such a traumatic event. But Satoru did something that most people don't, or can't. He kept renting the apartment where Namiko had died. He was determined to maintain the crime scene as it was, in the hope that something there might one day help to catch his wife's killer. It cost him significantly, around 20 million yen, which is equivalent to almost 126,000 US dollars over time. But he kept it. He didn't disturb a single thing. Namiko's CD collection stayed where it was. The calendar on the wall remained on November 1999. Satoru also went to the apartment twice a week, every week, even 20 years after the murder. He said that when he walked inside, he felt like time had stopped. He didn't want to erase what was there, partly for his own memory of Namiko and partly for Koei's sake. And understanding Satoru's plight, the landlord even lowered the rent on the property for him. Satoru largely stayed out of the media. When he did appear for interviews, he made a point of not crying on camera and asked camera crews not to film him or Koei in tears. He said he didn't want to give the perpetrator the satisfaction of seeing the damage she'd caused. He wasn't going to let her feel like she'd won. So he smiled. He laughed when it was appropriate. He kept himself composed publicly, and he put his energy elsewhere. Satoru became the representative secretary of an organization called Sora no Kai, a group of bereaved families of murder victims, and has spent years supporting other families in similar situations, particularly those connected to unsolved cases. Along with other members of Sora no Kai, he fought to have Japan's statute of limitations abolished for murder cases. Satoru was up against a ticking clock. At the time of Namiko's death, the statute of limitations for murder was just 15 years, meaning the statute of limitations for her case would expire in 2014. Discovering her killer after that time had passed would mean that whoever she was, and whatever her motive, she would walk free. Satoru fought tirelessly to prevent that from happening, and eventually, in 2010, the statute of limitations for murder in Japan was abolished. On February 5th, 2020, the Aichi Prefectural Police announced a 3 million yen reward for any information leading to the arrest of the perpetrator. Despite the reward, the witness accounts, the physical evidence, and more than 2 decades of investigation, the case remained open. No arrest had been made until 2025. Police had been looking at several people of interest over the years, though not all of them had been willing to cooperate fully with investigators. One of those people was a woman named Kumiko Yasufuku. She was a part-time clerk at a local supermarket, and she had gone to high school with Satoru. For years, she denied any involvement in the case, but at the same time, she declined to provide DNA samples to investigators. Then on October 30th, 2025, something changed. Kumiko approached police officers who were distributing awareness posters at a train station. and she told them she was willing to give a DNA sample to help with the investigation. And the results came back as a match. It was her blood that had been found at the scene. After more than 25 years, investigators had their perpetrator. Kumiko admitted to what she had done. She told investigators that in the time since the murder, she had lived with a persistent anxiety, particularly around the anniversary of the incident each year. She described going through stretches where she couldn't eat, she couldn't stop ruminating, couldn't function normally. Then, in August of 2025, she got the sense that investigators may have already identified her and that an arrest was coming. And that feeling was apparently what pushed her to come forward in October and give the sample herself. So why did she kill Namiko? The answer traced back to a reunion. In June 1999, just a few months before the murder, a high school reunion was held. Kumiko attended. She was known as a quiet and reserved person. But she had been in the same sports club as Satoru back in school, and according to people who knew her at the time, she had feelings for him. At the reunion, people went around and shared updates about their lives. When it was Satoru's turn, he talked about his marriage, that he had married a woman 11 years younger than himself and had 2 children with her, but that the marriage ended in divorce and that he had since remarried a woman named Namiko, with whom he had a son, Kohei. He also mentioned that his eldest daughter from the first marriage had passed away 10 years earlier. According to what Kumiko told police, her stated reason for killing Namiko was that she wanted Satoru to understand what it was like to raise a child alone. Whether Satoru's comments at the reunion, particularly about the circumstances around his first daughter's death, sparked something in Kumiko that she interpreted as him not taking parenthood seriously enough, or whether there were other feelings at play that she hasn't fully articulated remains somewhat unclear. But that was the motive she gave. Kumiko had seemingly no feelings about Namiko at all. In fact, she had never even met Namiko before the day she killed her. Namiko was just a victim of falling in love with the wrong person. As for how she knew where to find Namiko, there is a theory that Kumiko followed Satoru after the reunion to find out where he actually lived, though that has not been confirmed. The disguise she used, presenting herself as a drink salesperson to gain access to the building without raising suspicion, showed premeditation. The beverage found in the apartment, the one that was traced back to the Nishimikawa area, 35 kilometers away, showed that she had thought it all through. So what happened to Kumiko? As of now, the case is in the legal process, with hearings and trials ahead. Whether she will explain her motive in more detail or tell another story entirely is yet to be seen. When Satoru was asked about Kumiko after the arrest, he said he genuinely had no idea why she would do something like this. He remembered her as being someone kind. That part, he said, he still couldn't make sense of. The thing that really stands out about this case for me is the power of love. Satoru was so full of love for his wife that he eventually would not stop until the killer was found. He rented the apartment for over 20 years to preserve the evidence and maintain the memories of Namiko for himself and his son. Even given the amount of time that had passed since her murder, he still visited the apartment twice a week. He fought to have the statute of limitations for murder abolished in Japan, and he supported other surviving family members of people who had been murdered. Before Namiko died, he told Satoru that she was the happiest she'd ever been. The two of them had just signed a contract for a new condominium and were planning on having a second child. That future was stolen from them. But despite that, Satoru showed his love and dedication. On the 27th anniversary of Namiko's death, after the eventual arrest of Kumiko, Satoru said, "I think Namiko will forgive me now that I've come this far." That is all for today. Thanks for watching.